Good morning. I'd like to call the Door County Board of Supervisors to order on Tuesday, July 25th at 9 a.m. Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Present, 3.
We have 18 present and 3 absent. Presentation of the agenda. A motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Correspondence, we had an email from Robert Seegers, Paul and Cindy Zahn in your packet. Public comment, Ken?
Sure, sir. For public comment, we'll start with those individuals in the room first. If you'd like to speak, you can please come up to the podium in the back and we'll give you 3 minutes. And we'll turn on the mic there.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This public comment is related to the county's DEI initiative. And I wanted to let everyone know that it was such a privilege to serve on the DEI committee. And as the destination organization, I'm Julie Gilbert with Destination Door County. We are committed to collaborating with all organizations and businesses to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. And along with promoting a welcome environment for all who visit and live in Door County. Thank you all for supporting this important initiative.
Thank you.
If someone else would like to go, yes.
Christine Reed, 597 Sleepy Hollow Drive. I sent an email to the County Board, Soil and Water, and the Land Conservation Committee on July 11th. However, it's not included in the agenda packet because it was not received by Jill Lau. I have since resent it, and she will include it in the next month's agenda packet. On July 13th, I spoke to the LCC meeting and requested that my correspondence be included in the next agenda packet and that the committee add an agenda item to recommend the public health and groundwater protection ordinance that several people have requested dating back to 2019. There was a brief discussion about adding that agenda item to the next LCC meeting, and the committee decided that no, they would not add that request. The reason for refusing to recommend adopting this ordinance was that Greg Colthurst is happy with the well testing results, so we don't need it. We cannot wait for Door County wells to pour manure water from taps to take preventive measures. I'm going to quote a warning from the Karst Task Force report, which was included with my email to everyone here. Quote, a town ordinance banning land application of manure may result in farmers without storage transporting manure to neighboring towns and applying it in areas with higher risk than the original target field. That is exactly what is happening in Southern Door. Kewaunee County has adopted and is enforcing this ordinance, and Door County is not. Since Kewaunee County has restrictions on spreading, they simply truck it to Door County where the restrictions don't exist. Corporation Counsel acknowledged this problem in a response to me dated January 6, 2023. I'll quote his response to me. A warm January or April, for example, could create soil conditions where manure application can be performed in compliance with standards and prohibitions. End quote. We need to close the gap. Door County is a higher risk than Kewaunee County. Karst is more fractured and porous, and soils are thinner. Factory farms are expanding with new CAFOs coming online. Please pass this ordinance before it's too late. If I have a minute, I'd like to make a comment on another matter, the Mill Pond. Last week, the UWO students and Greg Coulter's were on the mill pond, and I was out with my kayak, and we met up out there. They were repeating the bathymetric survey that was done in 1997 mill pond report, and then done again in 2018. And they had, they were up against a wall of cattails. So hopefully there'll be an update on the conditions in the mill pond. However, that was last week. Over the weekend, there were many paddlers, visitors to the mill pond. And yesterday, I took pictures of considerable amounts of floating contamination or, debris on the mill pond, and especially around the park. And I will follow up after this meeting with some of the pictures of what is happening there. It wasn't there at the time that UWO students and Greg were there. They did firsthand experience the cattails and invasive vegetation,
You have 30 seconds left.
but not the amount of floating. It looks like somebody washed their CAFO in the mill pond. I will send pictures so that you're able to see what was not there last week when Greg was out there. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good morning. My name is Dick Swanson. I live in Algoma, 710 3rd Street. I've been here before. I've been all over before talking about this liquid manure problem. You just don't know what's coming, guys. Kewaunee County has lost control of what's happening down there. The Kennard farm, these other farms, they're going to get bigger. And you're not making any more land, are you? Our shit's coming up to you. We're sending it up here as fast as we can because we've put in ordinances that restrict when it can be applied, how much, where, why. We are working now to get the hauler ordinance put in place with many more restrictions. I know you have something in place, but before you lose the ability at a local level to put referendums together, to make changes, because the state may change that, you better do it. You're gambling with the future of Door County right now. More animals. And you know what? We talk about animals all the time. The animals aren't the problem. The cows are doing nothing wrong. It's their owners. It's your neighbors. They're the people. People are doing this. There's 100 different rules and regulations concerning how much, where, and when, where liquid manure can go. NR 151, NR 243, they have a beautiful table, tells you exactly how much, what is the maximum amount to be applied. The maximum amount. And here's something you don't know. Right now, a farmer can take 13,500 gallons a week out onto a field per acre. That's 54,000 gallons per month on 1 acre. He's allowed to dump that. That equals 459,000 pounds per acre per month. That's 229 tons of liquid, chemical, biological crap being put on your land. And you think it's okay? Here's the caveat to this. This is on 3 feet of soil. 3 to 5 feet. Here, they can put 229 tons per acre on a month.
30 seconds, please.
That's insane. You have to move. You have to get aggressive on this issue. This is a chance of a lifetime, in your lifetime, to make a difference. Do it now or forever. You will be looking at the pictures and you will be reading the headlines like this. Bacteria found in 60% of our wells, okay? This is an older report. Casco Township just had 49+% of their tested wells turn up unfit. Lincoln, Red River, those four, they're all moving this stuff north because you're letting. You can't fix the aquifer. You don't have enough money. And don't rely on the EPA and don't rely on the DNR. They cannot move fast enough. You are the ones who can move fast. It's your choice.
Thank you, sir. Time's up.
You want to look at pictures? We got them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the public who'd like to speak in the room? Excuse me. One more time, is there anyone else in the room who'd like to speak? Okay, I'll go to those online. If you're online, you could please raise your hand and I will allow you to talk. The first individual, I'll move you into the queue, is Paul Zahn. Paul, you need to unmute yourself and you can have the floor.
Okay,
Yep,
Paul John, 7946 West Cedar Drive, Forestville. Good morning. I'd just like to comment on my last two emails concerning the need for a better groundwater ordinance such as Kewaunee County and the conditions of the mill pond. As we all know of the many problems Kewaunee County had before, since then, there has been a huge increase in liquid manure spreading in Door County, as well as the approved dairy herd increases. If this is not resolved, we are looking at the same problems Kewaunee County had. Besides the fragile environment here, Door County is also heavily dependent on tourism. I also have seen Door County Soil and Water with UW Oshkosh personnel out on the Forestville flowage, performing lake evaluations. I am sure they observed the same conditions as I had reported. Lots of surface stringy pond weeds and increasing cattails spreading over approximately half the lake. Hopefully this and the groundwater ordinance will be addressed soon. Thank you for listening.
thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? One more time, is there anyone else who'd like to speak? With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Is there any supervisor's response? Okay. Approval of the minutes of the June 27, 2023 County Board meeting. A motion, a second. Any changes, deletions, additions, errors, or other grammatical remarks? If not, by voice vote, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. County Administrator.
Sure, just in your packet is this the monthly report on our operational and capital projects. The items in there, I provided just some minor updates, but for the most part, the projects are, I guess, in essence, still moving forward. If there's any questions, I can answer those. If not, we can proceed.
Todd?
Yeah, just for future agenda item or committee level discussion, there in your report, there was some discussion about a recreation center and then also about meeting critical mass in regard to maintenance. So it just would be good for us to maybe learn a little bit more about where you're headed with some of that or what that might be about, because maybe others have, but I haven't heard any details or any general conversation about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Vinny?
Thanks. I'm not sure if this is in the report, but just wanted to also, as Todd was saying, put on a future agenda or for consideration of a paid family leave program and knowing what the cost of that would be, regardless of whether the idea is liked or not, but I'd like to know what the financial cost would be as we're going into budget time. So thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. We're going to go down to our special report agenda. The DEI presentation will be next.
Sure, just give me one second to adapt the screen here. Okay, we have I guess a team that's gonna presenting on, kind of starting, but also with me today I have Amy from the United Way, I have Brett from the Community Foundation, also Brian with the North County Medical. And I'll just give you some context. You've heard part of the presentation before, but I'd like to go through the entire presentation this again. One, since it's been a while since we talked about it, but also two, this for those that are either in the room or online, just have an understanding of what we've been doing in terms of some of our work. Yep, sorry. So again, as far as history, if you recall, again, we have adopted as a county board a resolution back in 2021-31, where we talked about diversity, equity, inclusion. And we actually put together a series of statements. But in there, I think the things that just kind of came through is now therefore be resolved that the Door County's Board of Supervisors asserts that all residents and visitors shall be treated with respect and integrity. That the Door County Board of Supervisors support policies that improve access and remove gaps along social and economic constructs and advance understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion. And that also that we are, that the elected and appointed officials and employees are responsible for creating and maintaining a culture in which we respect diversity, equity, inclusion in the workforce in the community that we serve. As part of that, we also stated that we encourage advocacy by institutional and individuals to dismantle barriers and promote diversity, equity, inclusion. And at that time, we also asked the administrative committee to work with the administration to actually work on this endeavor. So when we put this together, and again, we talked about it, we actually put together a dual strategy. One was what we would do internally as an organization, and then also what we do externally as a community. So again, just really quick in terms of our internal strategy, we've done up through approximately phase 4. We did some initial training on DEI. We did an internal assessment, which was a survey that I shared with the county board once before. We have not done the external assessment, mainly because of our work with the external group, and I can kind of get into that. But then we have been working on certain plans. So we've also done some additional training this year, and we're looking at, when I get into doing some stuff in terms of our organizational change. But that's internal. My main focus today is really to focus on our external project that we've worked on. And if you recall, we had talked about Door County being kind of a part of the process, but not necessarily the overall lead. Although we've played a leadership role in organizing the committee and obviously facilitating the meetings. But it was really a grassroots effort by a lot of different groups and agencies involved. So I consider the county, we're definitely a passenger, but an active passenger on the bus, in trying to at least talk about the topic and get other community leaders involved in a discussion and what things might need to be accomplished. Early in the process, when I met with the individuals that are going to speak to you today, we really identified that we needed someone just to help facilitate the process and help get us through whatever path we were going to go forward. So we did put together an RFP. We ended up selecting NWTC to help facilitate us, which was an excellent process for us. And again, this work was funded by the county, United Way, Door County Medical, and the Community Foundation. Again, you're asking who are some of those key stakeholders. I have a list on there. What's excellent, or what I'm proud to say, is that I'm not going to read them all because there's a huge list. And that's something that we also be proud of in terms of those individuals who throughout the year, we've met for over a year, in fact, in over 24 meetings. But at some point in time, all of those different groups were somehow engaged or involved. And in some cases, if they were not able to attend, we at least had individuals that represented that part of the group. And then they had further discussions on their own in terms of what we were doing in terms of this activity. So the mission for the group, I think I stated this before, but I think it's worth reading one more time, is we're here to better understand diversity, equity, inclusion, strengths and challenges in Door County. Our goals are to identify these strengths and challenges we face, collaborate on actions to address the challenges and amplify strengths, and lead to motivate and empower our community to take action. And one thing I will point out is the one thing that we learned is, obviously you learned things that you can do better, but we also learned that we are doing things very well. And there's a lot of good leaders in Door County that are actually having these types of discussions and talking about ways to make our community better. So when we put together this statement, we actually added those things about adding strengths and communicating the things that we are doing well, because I think it's important to talk about that as well in terms of ways that we can improve. So when we were working on this, again, one of those things that we had talked about is how do we talk about this and actually put something of value or something that people feel that it's more, I guess, based on science, or at least based on research that's more solid in terms of what we were working on. And what we relied on is what's called the social determinants of health, which is a national standard to help gauge conditions in the places where people work, live, and play. And again, it really affects the ranges of health and how they value and how they live in their community. So really, it's actually based within public health. They actually rely on this quite a bit. But this kind of chart, this shows you, again, in terms of when we got into this, we weren't quite sure what that means to Door County. Again, if you understand our diversity, this from an ethics standpoint, we're primarily white in terms of our demographics, but there are still a lot of issues that we can look at in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, which also includes race, but there are other areas that affect us more that might not affect other areas. So when you talk about the social determinants of health, you're looking at things such as economic stability, the neighborhood, education, food, your community and the social context, and even your healthcare. So those are all items when, for example, when public health, when they do their 5-year plan and they survey the community, they ask those types of questions, and all those factors play into what they determine how they feel within their community. So from a group, we felt very confident that this was a way for us to have those discussions. It is a way for us to be able to approach other groups and have a discussion with them more on a contextual basis of how they interact and live within our community. So from that work, we actually put together a document which is included in your packet. My goal today was not to go through everything in that packet because there's quite a bit of work and research that was done. But let me just identify the primary components. The first one was this really a case of change, or the case for change. And really what that was about is really trying to understand one of those questions, well, do you really have an issue in Door County? A lot of us hear that, if I go back to housing, remember when we did the housing, there was always that story, well, we have a housing issue. We always have a housing issue. But we never really quantified that or actually tried to put any kind of a data or information to that. So when we did that study, we actually quantified what our needs are in terms of housing. This was a similar process, although not maybe as number driven in that sense, but we were looking for that case for understanding of what is going on within our community. And again, it was in all these different areas where we had stakeholders at the table looking at what those are. So the first part of the document just talks about that. And it clearly shows that we have things that we can work on as a community to be better. The next part is really tools for organizational change. And I highlight the word organizational because what it really is a process that they took this group with is really looking at how your organizations function and how you can address or make change or have discussions within your organization. And this ranges everywhere, everything from nonprofits to schools to governments to other nonprofit groups that were all sitting at the table. But again, it was this, I tuned it similar to strategic planning, but it was a specialized approach to strategic planning of trying to discuss certain issues that you commonly do not discuss. So that was also, I guess, part of the document and part of the work of the group. The third one is kind of the plan for action. In other words, what we'd like to do next, and we'll get into that briefly. And then the fourth part was a resource toolbox. There's been a tremendous amount of research that's been done for many years, but also obviously it's taken up the last 5 years. But at least we're trying to provide some tools for people either to be able to talk about certain issues or to be able to take action or at least plan for things or have those types of discussions. So that's all part of this plan or document that's in this packet for you. So in terms of next steps, when the group, I guess, completed this document, obviously they wanted us to make a presentation to the county board, which is why we're here today. But they do feel that our work is not done. It's really just beginning. So one of the things that we talked about as a group in terms of what our purpose might be moving forward, and I'll just read this to you. We're here to better understand diversity, equity, inclusion, strengths and challenges in Door County. Our goals are to identify the strengths and challenges we face, collaborate on actions to address those changes, and amplify strengths and lead to motivate and empower our community and take action. So very similar, maybe it's a few words different from where we started, which I found at the end very, well, if you understand the group, we went through 24 sessions. We are all over the map. I guess there's one, if I would remember to put in there, there's a chaos diagram where all it was is the scribbly lines all over the place. And it felt like some of those meetings we were all over the place. But in the end, when we all worked together, we still circled back to talking about this statement, and it still held true to us in terms of a group. So in terms of where we're hoping to go forward, right now, we had promised to meet again in September. What the group talked about at the end was to take this plan, present it to the county board, but then each of the stakeholders would be working within their organization to have those discussions in terms of organizational change. And then we come back in September to have discussions of what steps do we want to take, either within organizational change or as a community to keep on having this discussion. So that's kind of where we are, and it's included within that plan. And what I'd like to do is have our guests come up, if you guys could, and they'd also like to make a statement about the process and the document. So.
Good morning.
Brian Stevens, Door County Medical Center. Thank you for having me here, and appreciate being part of the process and part of the DEI committee over the last really year plus. It has been a learning experience for me personally, and it's been a learning experience for our organization. As Ken said, one of the things that we're trying to do right now is take some of the learnings that we've had from the committee work and apply them back within our organizations. And I've found that to be both challenging and rewarding. As you know, this can become a politically charged topic. And so when we talk about it within our organization, we have to caution against that. At the same time, some of the things we've learned as an organization are, very practical, very applicable things that help us to better live out our mission, which is to further the healing ministry of Jesus Christ in the communities we serve, especially those in need. And that especially those in need part is really where this initiative comes into play. So for instance, one of the things that we found is that we do have health disparities in our community. We would not have looked at that were it not for this process, or at least not in the timely manner that we have. So for instance, we found that Hispanics in our community have lower colorectal screening rates, have struggle to deal with high blood pressure, struggle to deal with their diabetes more so than other populations within Door County. So now we're in a strategic planning year at the hospital. So we're going to use that data to help develop action plans to help us try to close some of those disparity gaps. Another thing that we found at the hospital is that it really helps for us to have more Spanish speaking employees. And so that's something that we're making a concerted effort to make sure our recruiting practices and our policies and those sorts of things are geared towards an HR environment where we welcome all applicants and specifically encourage those who can speak Spanish to apply for jobs at Door County Medical Center. It really helps us reach out to the entire community and make people feel welcome in our facility. So there have been some really practical, wonderful things that have come out of the process. And even though sometimes it's a little bit difficult to talk about DEI, I guess we're trying to take the approach of it's important to talk about it so that we identify some of these practical things that we can move forward with, and we really want to focus on action. So again, thank you for letting us be a part of it, and look forward to seeing where it goes in the future.
I think the first thing I talk about from the point of view of the Community Foundation is I've been working there now for my 16th year, and I cannot recall ever participating in an initiative when so many leaders of community organizations continued to participate for more than a year. If you think about it, for the four of us, it was probably 3 years we've been part of it. Beyond the CEO of our hospital and the director of our United Way, we had the director or the CEO of our visitor bureau, of our economic development corporation. We had superintendents of schools. We had leaders, the executive director of Sunshine House and the Boys and Girls Club, and you can go down the list. And what I thought was so heartening about the conversations is it wasn't just sending functionaries or other staff people to it. There was a real commitment by the leaders of these organizations to participate. And I do give a lot of the credit to Ken as well. And I hope you know what you have here as administrator in keeping us all together and keeping us focused on the task at hand. I was asked to share a little bit about why the Community Foundation made the decision to financially support and continue to participate in this work. Your resolution called for, and I'm going to quote from it, building a truly inclusive culture for everyone, regardless of age, disability, gender identity and expression, race, nationality, ethnicity, parental status, religion, socioeconomic status, and sexual orientation. I mean, basically what you're calling for is a Door County in which everyone is welcome. And really, that's kind of what America's about, right? We're a nation of immigrants. It's supposed to be that if you come here with determination and hard work, you can pursue and chase the American dream. Now, your resolution essentially calls for us as residents to do what we can to help build an inclusive place and an inclusive Door County. The challenge is, as Brian pointed out, is that talking about inclusion is hard, right? It's always been hard. It's always been hard to talk about how we are different from one another. And it's become even more challenging in this hyper-partisan, turbocharged, angry political culture that seems to permeate a lot of our community, a lot of our country today. It seems that everything we do now needs to be seen through a political lens, as if every action we take inherently must be advancing an agenda. But the reality is, when it comes to inclusion, if you're going to ask most people, they don't know what to think. Right? We know what we're comfortable with. We know what makes us feel uncomfortable. We don't know quite how to deal with it. We don't know quite how to handle it. And so we have to create spaces where we, as regular people, not people with an agenda, not partisans, not advocates, but just people, can come together and talk about how we're different, about how those differences change the way and alter the way we might view the world, and understand how we can grow to accommodate and create a community that's inclusive for us all. The challenge is that we have to do it respectfully, right? This is really about civility. It's about being able to talk about hard things that are difficult in a way that are respectful to one another. Now, I've always had a pretty firm belief that what really makes America successful is competition, right? You own a landscaping company and you own a landscaping company, and I might be your customer. The fact that you have to compete for my business makes you all better. It makes you more efficient. It makes you more thoughtful. It encourages innovation. And it's good for me as a customer because I get better service. I get better pricing. It's good for us as a country when we compete in the business community. But the same holds true in our political world, right? The competition of ideas is healthy. The fact that you might think something different than me, your perspective might be different than mine, is a healthy thing if we're able to talk about it. If we're able to discuss those ideas and find a way to proceed that's better than any one of us could think on our own. Now, that's what we're really about in this entire process. The reality is that our work doesn't offer any solutions at all. There's no magic panacea in this work that says, here's what we're going to do and here's how it's going to work. What we did, as Ken pointed out, was look at the best thinking in the field and provide a toolkit that enables you to have a conversation. It's a framework for how to talk about things that are difficult. We're not saying what you should think. What we are saying is that you should think. You should think for yourselves and talk about these issues. And this toolkit is meant to be a framework for a business, an organization, a church, a neighborhood, a family to talk about these concerns. Now, I can guarantee you one thing: if you participate in any of these kinds of conversations, you will find yourself disagreeing with others. Somebody's going to take a perspective that you just think is crazy. Someone's going to say something that just doesn't make any sense to you at all. And that's okay. It's okay that we differ on these ideas, because it's the clash of those ideas that enables us to find a better way forward as a community. Expect that we will disagree, but we can do it in a civil way, because we all love this community. We all love Door County, and we're all working to make it better. Going back to your language, what we are here about, we want our community to talk respectfully about what it means to build a place that's truly inclusive for everyone. We'd be better off, and we will be better off, by having these conversations. And really, all of this work has begun because of your resolution and because you've asked us to have these conversations. And for that, our community and all of us involved would like to say our thank you to you.
I gotta follow that. I guess I should have when Fred said, go ahead, Amy. Amy Conley with United Way of Door County. So as some of you know, we ventured down this DEI path about the same time you guys were starting your conversations. So United Way Worldwide, of course, pushed us to jump into this sooner. I will tell you, our board jumped right in with me. There are some United Ways throughout the United States that are not on board with United Way's DEI work. Our tagline has been empowering people of Door County, and that means all people. And we focus on those words around acceptance and belonging. So that's kind of where we come from. So we know the words diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Some people bristle when we say those words. We like to look at it from the lens of acceptance or belonging. So that's kind of where we're coming at it from. Just a little history from the United Way standpoint. In July of 21, we had a diversity statement forever, but we were asked to actually strengthen it and make it stronger. So in July, we adopted a much stronger. It used to be about 3 sentences. Now it's a page. And it's something that our board looks at monthly as we're making decisions. It's truly driving our work. United Way Worldwide requires that our staff each have 7 hours of DEI training per year, and our board members 3 hours. And we do track that. I don't just check those boxes. This is something that our board is committed to doing. So that's been really important to us. Since 2021, we have hosted for you as a community 2 different 21-week equity challenges. You know, some of you have participated in those, or at least opened the link when I sent it to you and went, oh yeah. And that's okay too. Everybody has to learn at their own pace and be uncomfortable at their own pace. And that is what a lot of that was. In May of 22, we developed and accepted an anti-racism statement. So taking that diversity a step further to make sure that those minority populations in our community were seen and heard. And that is the piece where, as an organization, we really are struggling the most. Kind of echoing what Brian said about the Spanish speaking. Are all of our documents available in Spanish? Is our website in Spanish? If someone walks in our door and needs help, I don't speak Spanish. Does my staff speak Spanish? Right now we're relying on Google Translate, but how can we continue to improve and be better? So those are some of those goals for our organization. We're working on our job descriptions. We're working on our policies and procedures. And that's where, when you heard us talk about organizational change, that's the piece that so many of us need to do. We can talk about developing policies. We can go to our trainings, but are we really making those changes within our organization? So as far as moving forward with those tools that Ken highlighted for you, we're committed to continuing to do community outreach, bringing in speakers, offering programs. We want to use that toolkit to help our other nonprofit partners. Some are ahead of us in this game, but many of the nonprofits in our community, as you know, are volunteer run or 1 or 2 staff. So be able to give them and their boards those tools to venture down this path at the speed that they're comfortable moving with. Again, we're not going to force something down them, but make it comfortable and give them that guidance. And that continued commitment to serving everyone in our community, ideally through ongoing collaboration. So we thank you for bringing us together, as Brett and Brian have already said, and hope that this meeting we have in September, really everyone is still as enthusiastic as they were when we last met and want to continue this work. So I thank you for being part of this.
Any questions? Right. Thank you very much. Resolutions 2023-57, approval of woody invasive species control on Detroit and Plum Island contract. Mr. Fisher.
Give me Here we go. Page 12, I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2023-57. Approval of agreement with GEI to control woody invasive species on Plum and Detroit Island. I believe Sam is back there, and she will explain it to everybody much better than I would be able to.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, guys. As Ken kind of alluded, this is a resolution to award a contract to GEI to control woody invasive species. This includes fireberry, buckthorn on Detroit Island. This would be on Fish and Wildlife properties and Door County Land Trust properties. The funding for this, you guys already accepted a resolution, I think 2 months ago-ish. This is funded through U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and the Door County Land Trust is piggybacking on because it's easier to get a contractor at the island once than multiple times. So,
Questions? No one? Right, thank you. We will go to the voter board. That's passed by a majority vote of 18 yes, 0 no, and 3 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2023-58, marriage license fees, section 765.15 Wisconsin statutes. David?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2023-58, the marriage license fee, section 765.15 of the Wisconsin statutes. This was brought to the administrative committee by County Clerk Lau, with the recommendation that we make a change. It's been the same for a long time. Different municipalities have, or different counties have different fee rates, and the recommendation of the committee was to increase it to $100.
Questions? Alexis?
Thanks. I did look at the minutes from the admin committee last week and just looking for clarification or here, like just to, I guess I'm just so what are we going to do with the extra 55? Is it just to cover the cost of what we've been doing? Or I guess, so the increase, it's like, does that go back to the county clerk budget? I guess is what I'm, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? We'll go to the voter board. This passed by a vote of 17 yes, 1 no, and 3 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2023-59, Land Use Services Department fees. David, Enigo?
You want to go? Oh, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2023-59 Land Use Services Department fees. We have a second on it. As the resolution states, many of these have not been touched for a very long time. Cost of living does not exactly stay stagnant. We did discuss this considerably over several different meetings until we finally came with last meeting to make this resolution go through, and the department head is here if there's any other questions.
Any questions? Comments? We'll go to the voter board. Oh, sorry, wait. No, Alexis? Okay. We'll go to the voter board. Passed by a majority vote of 18 yes, 3 absent. Thank you. Amendment of Uniform Addressing System Manual. Dave, Enigo?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve Resolution 2023-60 Amendment to the Uniform Addressing System Manual. Resolutions there, we've obviously discussed this several times. This is a next step in moving forward with this. And again, the administrator is the department head is here if there's any questions.
Questions? Alexis?
I know we all want to get out of here, but I have a, so one of the things that stuck out to me was including language for like parks and campgrounds, and seemed, it calls out parts of communities differently, I guess, where it was talking about like, I was looking for the phrase and I forgot to write it down, but where it's more condensed versus spread out and all that. So my understanding of this process was that we had a consultant kind of go through, and somebody that's familiar with this, go through and write this. Is it safe to assume that this is standard language? Is there anything unique to the county that people may not be familiar with, I guess, and other parts?
It is substantially standardized. It is based on their other experiences in other municipalities, and what they've done. It's a little different than what I do in my municipality, but it's we played several scenarios out and it seemed to work fairly well. It addresses an issue that was gone, that was not taken care of in the past.
People are going to start seeing signs where they hadn't before, and I guess that's how I interpret it. So I just was curious. Thank you.
Would add anything, right?
I'm not sure that you're gonna see signs in places where they weren't before. Like basically the way anything, like any ordinance that we bring to you, anything in red is new and anything that's strike through is getting deleted. But we've always had language since we've had a uniform addressing manual at the county level about campgrounds and condominium complexes and things like that. And those were some of the things that we had struggled with, and we specifically asked the consultant to look at because we weren't sure that the way that we were doing things was the best way to do it, and they recommended the changes that you see before you. And the distinction for the areas, right now, it's just Fish Creek in the town of Gibraltar and downtown Bailey's Harbor, the core areas where they're going to stick with the parallel to the road signs, because there are areas in both of what you would think of as the downtowns of those towns, where there might not be anywhere to actually put a pole in the ground. And they didn't want to have it be where, you know, the buildings, you know, some of them had the signs on the building and some had them here and everywhere, and some were perpendicular. So they wanted it to be consistent. We wanted to have a defined boundary for those. So even though the core area of Fish Creek and the core area of downtown Bailey's Harbor are quite a bit bigger than what most people would think of as downtown for those, within those boundaries, that's the way those signs will go. In winter, if other kind of downtown core areas, in other towns become as dense and as close to the sidewalks and the roads, then we could add those in if we wanted to at that point.
Vinnie?
I admit this is hard for me to read in the red and understand how it might be different, and maybe you just addressed this, but for town of Gibraltar and the core area and Bailey's Harbor, what do you see as changes? And do those town boards, and have they had any input, or have you asked them about it? Or will we be replacing the look of anything in the town, and how would that change in the core area from what it is now?
Well, countywide in the towns, the signs are gonna be blue now instead of green. This in the downtown areas for Bailey's Harbor and Fish Creek, that'll be the main difference because the signs will still be parallel to the road. In other areas of those towns and the rest of the towns, the signs are gonna be perpendicular to the road and two-sided.
Maybe I haven't noticed them, maybe that's the point of this, so we do notice them more, but is it gonna be a significant change, do you think, in those areas, or have either of the towns had any comments about it or
They
thoughts
have
on
not,
it?
and we talked about whether it was appropriate to ask the towns. And
Okay.
the commission was no, because it's basically a uniform addressing ordinance. And if one town said, no, we want purple, and one wanted blue, and one wanted pink, and it's the county is the entity in charge of it. We did check, I should say, and I think the resolution says this, with the sheriff's department and emergency EMS, and I did reach out to Chris Hecht as well, but I didn't hear back from him.
I guess I was just bringing not so much to the color, but just, now do they have it marked on a building in different numbers, and now it's gonna have to be a sign they find somewhere to put, but.
Well, they're
that's-
supposed to have the
Yeah.
green signs everywhere, but I'm sure like when you wander around downtown Fish Creek, I can't picture green signs on half those buildings that are right up against the sidewalk. And we talked about that with the consultant as well. We will be providing the signs, and then they will be given specific instructions about where and how they're supposed to install them. The consultant said, not that we still have to do the RFP to get the signs actually constructed and installed. And they definitely want to put their names in for that, but they said they in particular would not ever put a sign on somebody's building now. They said they used to do that in the old days, but now the practice is to provide it to them and then let them put it up. And if they don't, we've got enforcement language in here that they could be cited or have to pay for a new sign if they've got rid of
Thank
it.
you.
So I'm not sure what happened when signs were put up 20 years ago in downtown Fish Creek, where those went. For those that don't have them.
Anyone else? All right, thanks, Mariah. By voice vote, all in favor? Aye, opposed? Carried, thank you. Resolution 2023-61, Door County's amended strategic initiative plan for the use of American Rescue Plan Act fiscal recovery funds and non-budgeted funds transfer to special project funds. David Engelbert?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2023-61 regarding the use of the ARPA funds and the manner it's going to be done. We had the resolution in place in resolution 2022-15 for the allocations to the various pockets that we would be using that money in. This is a method of working with the ARPA rules, and we'll be taking money from the county highway construction account and then transferring the money so that it can be used sooner, but the allocations are still in place, and you can get a better explanation from either Ken or finance or the Corporation Council was involved in writing this resolution.
John, you want to make some?
All right, so this monster resolution, essentially what it does is it changes funding sources. None of the original initiatives of the use of the ARPA funds are going to go away. Instead, we're going to pull funds out of highway to fund those projects, or that's what's proposed. And the ARPA funds would replace the highway funds for road maintenance construction. The reason that we're requesting that this be done is because ARPA funds have limitations on when they have to be designated and when they have to be expended. We want to burn out the ARPA funds sooner than later so that we don't run into the issue of we're out of time and a possible clawback for the federal government of those funds. So this isn't unique to Door County. Other counties have done things like this, but essentially it's just changing funding sources. We can apply the ARPA funds to highway construction projects and use them up in this year, and to whatever extent they can't use this year, as soon as we can in the future. But essentially, none of the original ARPA projects are going away. We're just funding them with county dollars instead of ARPA dollars now.
Vinnie?
For a future meeting, just so we can update on each of those categories of ARPA funding, and then if they're behind schedule for what we expected spending, which I'm guessing based on what we're doing, so, and that's fine, but just if we're gonna reallocate any of those or have different plans for spending them in a different time frame, just an update next time would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can address that a little bit now. Specifically, if you look at the original resolution, Initiative 6 has a reserve of $500,000. That hasn't been earmarked or allocated to anything. I mean, we have until 2026 to spend it. We have until the end of 24 to designate it. But things like that, we have as a county expressed an interest in sober living facility. Do we rush and try to quick find a sober living facility in this market that may or may not work and adjust it? Or if additional time is needed, do we want to allow the county some additional time to find the one that works best for the county? Those are just a few points where a little extra time may be needed. Not that we're looking to delay anything, but in the event that we do need extra time, this will give us that.
Todd?
Yep, obviously, this was in the news a couple of months ago, about the initiative to claw back unspent dollars. Has the county received any input from the federal government or state government about accountability of it? And is there any request to ask us what we've spent and what we haven't spent? Has that officially came or not?
We are reporting what we're spending money on, and we will continue to report what we spent money on. Actually, if you look at the resolution, the transfer of funds from the original initiatives will be changed large part to government services. That is an authorized use of funds that we receive from ARPA. What government services are essentially things counties do, including road construction. So we are limited still in what we can expend the funds on. This is within that allowed use of the ARPA funds. As for clawing it back, I mean, the possibilities out there, whether the federal government will actually do that or not, is yet to be seen, but we want to be ahead of the ball and make sure that we are using these funds so that we comply with the federal regulations and use them appropriately.
But there's been no correspondence to the county. Okay, thank you.
No.
Any other questions? We will go to the voter board. Thank you, Sean. Plus, we'll need a 2/3 majority on this one. That's passed by 2/3 vote of 18 yes, 0 no, and 3 absent. Thank you. All right, before we move into a capital improvement plan, we'll take a 10-minute recess. In session. Resolution 2023-62, capital improvement plans, 2024 to 2028. David,
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2023-62, the capital improvement plans. All of the items in this capital plan, I believe, went to the oversight committees and came back with recommendations. It's quite a list with a lot of money. And I guess I'll make some additional comments after with that too.
Ken, do you want to?
Yes. So let me just walk it through for everyone. So the first one is, remember that this is a guiding document. So even though we're looking for you to adopt it today, it still can change as part of the budget process. So once we have all the numbers in, but really it's used for twofold. One is to get your endorsement in terms of what items we would try to include in our budget for next year. But then also it's a good planning document to see what's on the horizon coming forward and things that we're facing as an organization. So let me just walk you through the quick version and we can have a discussion. But so let's go to page 47. And 47 is going to be important because that's what we're looking at doing for our next fiscal year, 2024. So if you're looking at the document, you will see items in black and then items in red. So everything that was in black was what was submitted either by the department head and went through the committee and was approved. But anything in red was then items that either were added or were amended in terms of how we would fund it or the amount of funding related to it. So for example, I'll just walk through two easy ones. So for the museum, that was how it came in proposed in terms of the funding. So we have money that was set aside and we're looking at doing an additional 450,000 to get to our total for what we think we need for the project. And we're using levy dollars to complete that funding. Okay. But then right below it, we had the library remodel. And we originally had thought we'd do $500,000 from levy. But what we're proposing, instead of taking it from levy, we're going to take it from the sales tax reserve and also the money that we set aside for the prior year, which gives us a total then of $1 million for 2024. So that's how the document works. So then really quick, let me just walk you through these areas and then let me go through the document and then we can definitely have a full discussion. So sure, please.
So on the one you spoke about, the library, essentially we've driven that up $500,000 by grabbing funds from another spot. The budget, right?
Not grabbing money for another spot. It's money that the sales tax is money that we have to use towards the budget. So, but yes, we're taking it from that funding source and applying it to this project. And by doing that, we're setting that money aside for that project.
But the CIP was originally for 500,000, right?
No. So for the library project overall, we're expecting, again, and we're still, I guess, going through that planning process. We're expecting overall that it'll be about a $5 million project, but that'd be split in half between the city and the county. So I guess our target's probably going to be about 2.5 million. My guess would probably be it's going to be a little higher than that by the time we're 5 years out. So what we're trying to do is to set that money aside and build a fund for that. What we've traditionally done as a county is if we know of a project that's coming up, we try to either try to put money aside so we can spend for it to avoid the bonding, or we plan for the bonding in the future. So this is one of those where we know it's coming. We have one-time money in terms of the sales tax, and you don't want to apply your sales tax to your operating budget. So this was a good use of those allocations of dollars. So just continuing on, just to describe the projects, the airport are pretty standard. Again, this is one of those similar cases where we're again setting aside money to go towards those projects. And in each one of those projects, we are working with the Bureau of Aeronautics in terms of what their match will be towards those projects. So again, our $25,000 that we're saying part of the levy is going into an account that we have money set aside for future projects, and that's only a portion of the total project cost. County Highway, again, those are identified projects that they're looking at doing for next year. Again, sometimes those change when the committee goes out, and if there's any significant issues with the road that's in better or worse condition, they can swap some of those. But in general, We're looking at spending $3.6 million on roads for next year, which meets our requirements for the number of miles we try to get each year. But they also have some state funding for 2 projects that they are expecting as well. Then turning the page to go to page 48. Again, you're going to see some more red in terms of some changes that we're making in terms of the projects. But under facilities and parks, we have the top line was what was requested in terms of originally from the department head. You can see that's been crossed out. We then added the exact same project right below it. We're just changing the funding sources. So again, if you remember that project that came in over bid, we postponed moving forward with that. We were hoping to get, I guess, lower bids now this fall. But again, just based off what the projections are, Wayne had put in request in for 490 to bring it up to the full funding amount. In terms of that, we're looking at doing 390,000 in terms of levy and then $100,000 from the sales tax. Again, just where we're grabbing the money from to make that money whole. If it were funded at that full amount, then we have $1.1 million that's available for when the project goes out for bid and construction. If you go then to emergency management, you'll see they had the towers in there. We are moving the towers down into technical services, and I can get down to that. But the other project is this for hardware replacement for the call center. For emergency services, you're looking at, again, where we're taking some money out of the sales tax. We did have a pretty lengthy discussion, both at public safety, but even at finance on this one. I know there's going to be some discussion on whether or not, or if we even need the ambulance station or not. It's been on our capital improvement plan for about 5 years. We keep on pushing it back 1 year. We had worked with public safety and we're committing ourselves to either put together a plan of showing what that need is and if it's justified and how we're going to proceed and make that happen or not. But knowing that it's on the radar, again, at that time was 1 year out. We are again, instead of trying to have a large project that's unfunded or having to go for bond, we're actually recommending we put aside money, again, with sales tax reserve. So we're starting to build a fund saying that we might have this building coming up. Then you go below, you can see, again, now we've added the tower replacement. This is one that we will be discussing when we do our retreat. But again, we're looking at, again, putting aside some additional money, and we also have money set aside. When you see in the upcoming pages, we're looking at this project probably being around that $24 million mark, all said and done. And we're actually working both with our consultant, but also Ellers, our financial consultant, and looking at how we would actually fund this project. But this one obviously would be something there where we can set aside money each year, and we're going to try to reduce our overall bond amount, but this will be a project that ultimately will have to go out for bond. Again, we're also trying to work on refining those numbers, but again, best numbers that we have to date based off the consultant is around that $24 million mark. Then the other items under technical services are just their server replacements, and you can see the funding sources. From this case, you'll see those are listed under other, mainly because they almost have something similar to our vehicle replacement. They have like a fund that we put money into, and then we make the expenditures for that equipment when it comes due. And then the last one is for scanning of sanitarian files. Again, if you recall, we're trying to do an initiative to automate or go digital with many of our long-term records. We did the treasurer, or the treasurer is actually being done this year, and now we're moving on to land use services. The first category will be the sanitarian files. We're using $55,000 from levy and also $55,000 from the land records modernization fund, which is a qualifying expense. All said and done, if you look at our KIP total, again, if you recall through our budget process, usually that 4.6 is where our sweet spot is in terms of where we try to build our budget. Again, we're at 6.66, so we're up about $40,000, showing about a 1% increase. But it puts us in a good spot for our budget moving forward for 2024. Then really quickly, if you don't mind, I'm just going to kind of go through, you'll see, then it goes by year. You'll see 25, 26. And again, you're going to see some of those projects in there. I think the one that's probably the most effective would be to look at actually jumping to page 53. And in 53, it gives you an idea of the projects and the funding that we're looking at. So it actually has by the airport by year, county highway, you can see each one of those years where we're looking at doing our segments of road, right? But you actually can see in some of those cases where it's not quite as clear, but let me just give you an example. So under page 53, if you look at airport, you can see where we're setting aside money, and then all of a sudden in 28, you're looking at that larger expenditure for the fencing, right? So we're trying to get that money set aside. But that total funding is some of that's from the Bureau of Aeronautics, and then it's also our match for that. But you can see that money coming in. Likewise, you can see above that, we're hoping that some of those projects start moving forward in terms of the equipment building and so forth for 25. But you can see that money being set aside and then when that expenditure hits. So for highway, that one's pretty consistent in terms of when you see those happening in terms of each year. Again, the big thing with highway is you can see some bumps where we're probably a little bit high. They're on that $4 million mark. Again, we're going to probably, just because of cost and inflation, we're going to start having to think about moving that 3.6 number up. But again, we'll look at trying to how we, and some of those don't have all the funding sources. So although it might say like 4.3 or something like that, some of those might be offset by revenue from the state in terms of grants or aids. You'll see the museum, hopefully will be bid out next year. Again, then you can see, for example, the emergency services. We set aside money potentially for 24. Then we looked at putting money aside again in 25 to give you what the potential total project cost is. Similarly, now you can see the library remodel at 24. If we put aside that 500,000, it puts us at $1 million. And again, you can see us trying to build up that fund to get to that 2.5 mark. So that's our capital plan of trying to get to that mark of putting money aside so we can actually afford the project in the future. You see the maintenance garage, then you drop down to the next page. I think this is probably one of the best ones would be really looking at two things. One is the 911 center. Again, we're putting money aside for a larger expenditure in the future for hardware replacement. Again, just based off life planned. But really the big one will be under technology services. You can actually see where we're actually setting money aside under tower replacement. And again, really that tower replacement is just us setting money aside because we are projecting some additional towers that are required. But then you'll see the big one is in 2026, you'll see that $20 million mark. That's really when we're gonna potentially make the true investment in all the technology. And when you do that, you can't do it piecemeal. You gotta literally buy all the equipment and you have a little bit of overlap, but you're actually literally switching the switch in terms of the technology. But again, that's where that's projected. So again, if you're looking at overall totals, you can see what those projected totals are overall in terms of our KIP. But again, it's a really good planning document and it puts you in a good spot. I guess the one thing that also helps from a planning perspective, if you go to page 59, it then takes all of your funding sources and it looks like, well, how are we going to pay for all this stuff? And you can kind of see where we're looking at, in my perspective, the number that, or the column that's important for you as a county board would be the tax levy. So about 5 lines down, remember our sweet spot that is about that 4.6 number, right? So you can see 4.6 for 24. We have a little bit of a blip in 25. That we'll have to have, where are we getting that additional million about? But then you can look out at our projections. Again, taking out the bonding, right? Because that's to be determined at 20 million. But otherwise, based off our projections on those projects that are listed, our best understanding, we are sitting in a good spot in terms of our future fiscal needs to fund these projects going forward. So that's kind of a brief but a little bit detailed overview of the KIP. Again, it's a good planning document. And really what we're looking for today would be your discussion and hopefully approval to at least adopt the plan. Again, I'll just reiterate that the plan can change though based off what we see in the budget. So if there's something that, when we do our wage study or comp study that throws our numbers out of alignment, or we learn something else more detailed on a project, we have the ability with the budget process to update that, but we'll communicate that with you as we go forward. So with that, we can take questions and Steve is here and we can walk it through. Okay.
No questions? There we go. Vinny?
Yes, okay, well, the finance committee advanced this, but on a personal opinion, I guess it's a really large wish list, I think. And because of the roughly $2 million of extra sales tax money that we took in, we're able to allocate some of that to those different projects. And we need to hold places for these things that we have in mind that we might like. But the overall picture, I think, is at least my perspective, when we look at a potential 20 million, 25 million towards that whole communications project, I find it hard that we can then allocate all the extra money to the Parks Garage or the extra money to the library remodeling. Certainly if the Miller moves out of that facility, it's going to need some work. But to look at a $5 million renovation enlargement project for the city and county, I don't see that those are really affordable when we have looking at a project that we have to almost say we must do in communications, and that affects the total amount that you're going to borrow there. That's just a couple of the allocations that we're looking at. That Parks Garage, we slowed down the possibility of constructing it last year. Again, at public safety, the issue came up of where the ambulances are being repaired, or where even the oil changes. And it was asked, can we work with the highway department on some of that same possibility? Well, it's not an easy thing because highway runs its own business, but I think it is feasible to look at that, and some of the work that the Parks Department is doing on garages, that there's some cost savings that might be achieved. I think there's a lot of study that needs to be done on these plans.
Thank you. Vinny?
Thank you. Can you give a refresher? What was the total sales tax revenue? I see that 500,000 to the library and then 100,000 to the maintenance garage. So that's 600,000.
2.2? Yeah, about
Okay.
2.2 million.
Okay, so it's not even getting close to using all of that on those projects. And that was one question I had. And then can we consider through committee process where the sober living facility could be in this, or could have some set aside for it? I know some is set aside through ARPA and through Health and Human Services, but I see that probably expanding in cost, and would at least like to see, if we're committed to it, a place marker in the CIP for that facility, whether it's something we purchase or something we build. I know the committee's been, or the department's been looking for places to purchase for maybe 2 or 3 years and have not found them. So yeah, whatever committee process we need to go through to show that commitment to that facility. But this seems like a place that could have at least an earmarker for some of those funds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want me to answer them as we go, or just take the questions?
Sure, right.
So I don't know if you want me to answer as we go or just kind of go through, but so let me just do it as we go. So I'll do the sober first and I'll go back to the parks. But this on the sober living facility, that one we concur. And that will be part of the ARPA discussion. And again, there's funds that are there. So that'll be a discussion not only at our retreat, but you just requested also too that we do a summary on the status of our ARPA funds. So between the money that we have there plus the money that's unallocated, we are still comfortable with the dollars that were there. But we can have that discussion in full at the retreat. And that's why I said this is why it's a good planning document, because again, there might be a change in priority where that's a higher priority than it is to set money aside for the library. And maybe we take some of that money and say, no, we want to use it in this way. So that's why it's a good resource or a good document for us to use as a planning, not a final decision thing. In terms of the parks building, again, in terms of the need, I think I'll have Wayne is here so he can describe that. But I know there's been a lot of discussion on what can be done at Highway, and we've done a lot of research on that, both with Thad in terms of both staffing and capacity, but also the building itself. So really the highway facility itself is at capacity, and there's not the ability for us to do maintenance outside of Highway. So, and we've had lengthy discussions that mainly because one, there's just the amount of work that they do within their existing bays. So you could look at putting an addition on there for an additional bay, but the building's not designed for that. But the work and the staff alone, just because of the requirements for what it takes for them to do the service. One, they don't have enough maintenance. They went from 3 down to 2 maintenance workers. But also too, just because of the overhead cost that's required to be charged, it's not a cost feasible model for us to use them for maintenance. So we can get into detail of that if you'd like, but again, we've really flushed that part out in terms of the highway facility being used for other departments for maintenance. So besides that, I mean, we can go into more detail, but at least from that standpoint, take the highway facility off. Now, whether or not you still want to do that building is another question, but in terms of the highway facility itself being able to do that, we've kind of had in-depth discussions both with Thad, the building itself, but also staffing. So, but maybe Wayne, you can give some background on the need and what it'd be used for.
Yeah, I think we've discussed the county board last year when we came with the bid of what the need was and how long we've been trying to do this as an organization. One of the parts was at the airport, right? So they were working out of a hangar with a porta potty, and no water there. And so the initial thought process was, hey, let's just get some bathrooms in here and some water so people can take care of their essential needs as human beings. And so we've worked on that for, I don't know, it's been 20 years probably that you guys have been trying to do that. So we put this design together, we put this building together with the future in mind. So when we talk about some of those future things, and I don't know how much you want me to share.
Yeah, you can share. Go ahead.
With our latest meeting.
Yep.
So we had a meeting with the chief deputy, the highway commissioner. I think Steve was there.
Sure.
Aaron Leclerc, right? And kind of discussed this, the need for vehicle maintenance fleet-wide across the county, whether it's an ambulance or a sheriff's squad, or a soil and water vehicle, whatever department it is. The building has the capacity to bring that all in-house. So we don't have to wait to do oil changes and basic things on ambulances. We don't have to wait 2 weeks to get into a local auto dealer place to have the sheriff's vehicles worked on. So we can bring that in-house with primarily the equipment that we have. I made one change in some equipment that's gone back to our development at Integrity Engineering. So they're gonna just give us some cost changes there that we'd be able to handle those ambulances or even our own trucks that we send out now. We could keep those in-house. The challenge is going to be, we need a person, right, to do about 112 vehicles plus auxiliary equipment, lawnmowers, tractors, some different things like that. So if we're going to add a capacity of 100 vehicles, we can't just take that on with the current staff that we have, because we're already sending our stuff out. And so the building's designed and it can handle that. There's 3 lifts within the bays. And so that's where the conversation's kind of gone as it came up through emergency management or law enforcement committee. And it's on facilities and parks for this next month to discuss that idea, you know, to bring all of that vehicle maintenance in-house with some type of mechanic.
Todd?
So what's the timing of this? Are we as a county board are being asked today to approve this CIP? Is that correct? Is there a timing issue with that, or is it something that could wait for the retreat when we have more discussion, or is there something from a tax levy perspective that is important?
No, there's nothing in terms of, again, we have always had a timeline of how we do things. So it's been traditionally we adopt this plan here and it's used as a guiding process for the budget itself. Can we wait a month or even 2 months for it to be adopted? Yes, we could. Yeah. Again, Steve and I will use pretty much from this standpoint, if we use the adoption of what these projects are, we build them into the budget. And then that way we make sure that the budget ultimately, when it brings to retreat, balances. So we could build the budget without you adopting it today and show you that, okay, the projects we have proposed are built in or not built in. But yeah, I mean, there's no urgency to adopt it today.
Okay. All right. So just because I'm on a particular committee, it's kind of ironic that Wayne is up here because I'm going to talk about that maintenance building. But so I don't remember. So in talking to David, his opening statement was that he assumed that all of these flowed through committee. I don't remember in our Parks and Facilities Committees talking about increasing the budget to 1.15 million for this. Now, maybe it's immaterial, that it shouldn't have been discussed. But I think as it relates to a project like this that went from 390 to whatever it was, 7 or 9, and was voted down, and then the show back up in the CIP here in July, I feel a little bit hollow about the discussion along the way. Now, notwithstanding what Wayne was talking about here in regard to now, instead of being a parks, this probably was discussion that we had. When we talk about now including maintenance, bringing maintenance back, and this to me, I think is a different discussion than we originally had about a parks and facilities. I mean, is that the right place for that? If we're going to be changing oil, is that the right place for that? If that's really what's driving this now to 1.15 million, I guess my point is, and Roy, maybe you can correct me, but I don't remember having this discussion in our committee. So to your point, David, I would say that one in particular, I don't believe flowed through committee. I don't believe. Could be wrong.
All the CIPs and the non-CIPs came to committee on the same month.
Okay,
Because I also
did I
brought
just
the
miss it?
library
Okay,
and
so I missed
museum.
it. Okay, so I don't remember the conversation about raising that to
Yeah.
1.15. So my bad
No,
on that particular piece. But I guess maybe I would probably have the discussion, is that what we really want to do? So to me, the broader score of really dreaming up projects or thinking progressively about where this county's going, and we're probably going to see this with the museum next, is that because that has had ample discussion in committee. And I think everybody on committee, and probably including you, Wayne, are concerned about our budget and where this is probably going to come. As a county, we're talking about, from a CIP perspective, about warming up to $6.4 million for a museum and archives renovation. And now there's other dollars being pulled from places. We're going to defer maintenance. So already it's probably, for sure north of 7, maybe north of 8. When that comes in at a number that might be 10, 11, or 12, I don't know if that our process. So we have a choice either to say, yep, we're going to have the additional funds, or not go back and revisit. No, that's not what the county envisioned. We're not having the stomach for 10 or 11 million. And maybe that's not the number, but in this particular case, we talk about the maintenance garage. The original discussion was 390. Obviously, there was not, or 400. There was not all those other things we had talked about the garage and 3 lifts and moving oil changing stations and consolidating, overall maintenance of the county equipment. So I just feel that maybe that needs to go back to a committee and discuss that a tad bit more. I considered introducing a resolution to force this not to be $1 million project, to say, amend the CIP to make it $500,000. Do what you can with $500,000. The original discussion was water and toilet facilities, right? So is there a discussion that needs to take place about this other stuff? Maybe I'm the only one that feels this. Maybe I've been asleep in committee meetings, but.
No, and I guess, again, I would never, okay, you said it, but I'm never going to suggest you're sleeping at meetings. So that's not, I'm not going down that path. But also, I guess I would, and again, as a friendly thing, I would also push back just a little bit in terms of, I think there's a lot of history that we're not remembering that we went through the discussion. So when you say, we talk about bathrooms, yes, that when we initially brought this up, there was a little basic thing about, well, should we just put bathrooms in there? And then that discussion that quickly was on the radar and dropped in terms of, we're not going to spend at that time. I'm not even going to throw out a number because we're sticking with numbers. But as that number was not reasonable to not look at a longer term, what do we need for a facility? In other words, we would invest that much money in just 2 bathrooms into what the existing structure is, in existing condition of that building. So that's when it went to, okay, what are our needs in terms of a park? And it went from that number to about the $650,000 mark. I mean, we can go through all the history, and it's really the purview of the committee. So this would be, in my response is, I'm fine with having that discussion. I mean, we could adopt this today yet, or we could postpone it, but it's really up to this committee to come or go back to committee and say, okay, let's have a full discussion on this, because we are ready to pull the trigger potentially next year. And do we feel comfortable moving forward with this project? And if that committee, in other words, in this case, it'd be Highway Facilities Committee, goes back and they review it and they don't want to do it, or they want to modify it, that's the purview of that committee. So I think the discussion's good, but I think just to follow our traditional process, it should be the process that goes back to the highway facilities in terms of having that discussion, scoping out the project, and making sure it's something they feel is necessary and viable. Because that's always what we relied upon, is that process. And usually when these projects come to this point, the rest of the county board, for example, on the airport, that's gone through that same committee, you know, we're relying on that committee to understand that the runways need to be done, the fencing needs to be done. So when it gets to that point of where we're ready to pull the trigger, we're relying on that committee to do their due diligence. So if we needed to go back, we have a window of time now to do that, and we could change course if we need to.
And, you know, for me, it's the broader discussion about county spending in general. You know, obviously, since I've been on the board, which is my 3rd year here, 4th year, whatever it is, we've always had a couple of multi-million-dollar projects going on, and maybe that's progress. Maybe that's what Door County stands for here. But you know, we talked a little bit in a meeting a year or so ago about, you know, taxpayers of this county, and obviously understand the tax levy and so on and so forth. But taxpayers of this county are seeing some pretty significant increases on their tax bills. I know for certain, you know, the Southern Door County, not even with the current referendum going on in that school, experienced, you know, several $100 increases in that tax bill. So whether that tax is going to the county, the state, or the school, and pretty soon people are going to get fed up. And as I see these large projects going on, I just think about how could we become just a tad bit more austere here in the few years. And like David, that $20 million project, I think maybe if that is imminent, that's going to be spent in a couple of years, maybe instead of these other things, we do a maximum funnel to that kind of stuff. You know, so you're borrowing less, and you maybe don't have to borrow. It's probably a wish, just an idle wish there that we wouldn't have to borrow. But to me, it's a sense of spending. That's why I had asked the question earlier about in the opening about, I don't know what this rec center is. I have no idea, or exercise center, or whatever it is that was called. Where's that come from? You know, and what is that? You know, we'll hear about that in the future. But again, thank you.
Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just, is it possible, or maybe I'm misreading this, but is it possible to put on this, your spreadsheet, that's expected start dates of these? Because you said the library, we're funding. When do we expect these projects to actually begin some type of construction?
Okay. Yes, I guess we can do that. There's 2 things we're going to change in the future, and it came through finance. So one, we're going to put down the total estimated project cost, and we can actually put down the anticipated start date. So if it goes out further than 5 years, you may not see it, but in general, the trigger dates, actually, the one table I went through is usually when the project hits is when you're looking at the expenditure date. So like, for example, on page 53, just looking at the airport. So you're looking at those projects as an example. In 2024, we're still setting money aside, but you're looking at 2025, you're looking at the 6.8 expenditure. That's when the project's happening, because you don't see anything beyond that.
Okay, so the decline in these amounts in there would trigger the start dates.
Yeah, once you kind of see the big expenditure dates, that's when it's actually, I guess, projected to hit. And then after that, you're not setting aside money anymore for those.
Thank you.
Vinny?
Could you talk us through quickly, page 48 at the bottom, about the overall big picture of the CIP and what percentage, if we adopted all of these different projects, and I understand what Supervisor Thays is saying about spending money, but I think it's good for us to step back and look at the big picture and say what amount of money is in the CIP, what percentage are we taking out total for all of everything you're suggesting, and then what percent remains in a reserve, and just making sure we're within our policy of what we said we'd keep in there. It's been, since I've been here, we've been way over it as far as not spending like down to what a percentage would be. And so where do we sit with that, with this proposal?
Okay, that's a good question. And it's something that we hit at the retreat. So right now, and again, I'm not advocating for spending by any means, but the one thing I guess I'm very proud about what Steve and I have done, or what we have done as a body collectively, is that we have been very fiscally sound and I consider us very fiscally conservative. So when we're looking at a lot of these expenditures, we're not actually hitting the tax levy. Again, you could argue that, well, you could take that money and actually reduce the tax levy. I understand that. So that's, I guess it's a double-edged sword in terms of that. But if you look at where we've been in terms of both our spending and our bonding, so originally we had anticipated in one of my models that we'd actually would have bonded for this tower project a few years back. This is the time exactly when the Justice Center debt came off. So from a taxpayer standpoint, they would never even experience any type of change. So from a county tax perspective, the county tax actually went down when the tax levy was dropped from the Justice Center debt. So in hindsight, if this project would have been where it was originally anticipated, we could have actually bonded in that same year and had our debt almost be identical to what we were paying, and the taxpayers would have known the difference. So when we do bond for this, sure, our taxes will go up. You're going to see that debt coming back up. So that's definitely cognizant in my mind. In terms of where we're using, if you see here, there's no projects here that we actually touched our reserve. So that's another area right now, Steve, we're approximately 23%. So that's a discussion that we'll have at the retreat, because we still also have a healthy balance at 27. Okay, 27, I apologize, 27%. So again, with that, we're sitting very healthy in terms of a cash reserve. And that's always a discussion I think people have, is that why are we sitting on taxpayer cash if that's our policy for a range? From our standpoint, again, the minimum balance, we've always had a discussion of should we adjust that? And we've never adjusted it, mainly because we don't want to tie our hands into that policy. So again, but there's cash there. So I guess my story is that from a financial standpoint, we are financially, I think I consider us in a strong position. It doesn't mean I want to go out and spend or do more. I'm just telling you that as a financial position, you're in a strong position financially. And we've done very well in terms of, how would I say it? In terms of taking our cash and spending it on projects that are increasing our operating stuff. We set aside that cash and we put it towards projects or expenditures that we know are coming. And then we do those expenditures and they come off the books, but we're still fine operationally. So I think we avoided some of those cliffs that other counties have gotten into of spending it on operational stuff and trying to put it towards projects that we know that are coming. I do concur that we need to understand of what projects we're doing, do we want them? Again, that's where I think this process is when we go through these plans. When you're looking at, for example, the museum, I mean, we've been discussing the museum, Dan, since 2012 is when I know one of the original plans go back, right? So we just spent $80,000 on the architect fee based off what we thought was a consensus as this board to move forward. So we're kind of at the point now when we're doing architectural drawings and stuff like that we really need to have these projects vetted out. And if we need to change that process, I'm more than willing to do that. But again, that's been our process and where we've been. But I don't know if that answers your questions on the kind of the finances, but we'll get into more of that at the retreat as well. So
it's kind of why I'm going to rely on what the department had suggested that we should do as needs, because I feel like these elected positions come and go when you look at from 2012 or even 20 years ago, trying to get bathrooms into a facility. So I'd rather move forward with these projects, knowing we're fine with the reserve amount we have and we're not overspending and just get going on them. So if we need a committee meeting to do that, let's get going on them, because I don't want to look back in 10 years and have the same discussion. So thank you.
When we built the community center and EMS, this was part of that whole complex of project, but it was scrapped off of there because we needed to move fuel centers. We found out that we had contaminated soils. So we made conscious choices to not touch this building. We did a couple small things as far as storage of other departments' equipment. But we didn't actually touch this building. And that was part of that conversation in 16 and 17 when we did design development for the ADRC, right? The community center and EMS building. And so it was scrapped then, even as part of that conversation. So we're making those choices these days. I think we are, and we're just trying to fit it in where it's going to fit in the best within, the budget in the correct year and how to make that happen.
Dan?
Well, I think we're losing track a little bit what this document is. It's just a planning document that could be changed at any time. David's ideas are good, Todd's ideas are good, but they should be vetted out at the committee meetings long before. And we got to concentrate on just 2024 right now. The rest is sort of a dream or whatever you want to say. It could be changed at a later date, but to try to change this document, that's what the document's there for, to kind of look into the future as a wish list, and figure it out. And a lot of these things have been in the pipeline now for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years and been vetted out. And to the newer members of the county board, they might not know all the reasons that things are why it got there in the first place, but anyway, it's a planning document that could be changed, so.
Thanks, Dan. David?
Yes, thank you. I guess to Dad's comments about what was said and done at the facilities meeting, some of the issues with the EMS getting their vehicles serviced, or the idea of now of having a maintenance facility for all the county vehicles. I don't recall that being talked about. That wasn't the emergency ambulances was not talked about having a county facility, other than maybe I think Mr. Zettel had talked about the highway as a possibility. So I think it seems there's a lot of discussion that on how that building, that one example of a building evolving into other uses, not saying the uses are bad, but the oversight committee has, I don't think, discussed those, that sort of venture into 3 lifts for oil changes and working on all of county vehicles. Is that worthwhile? Is that something that we're seeing a problem? So now we want to go in that endeavor. Every building that we put up requires maintenance and operational costs. There's a lot of things that work in there. Are we doing a good job trying to look forward into the years coming and the projects coming? Yes, I think we do. But it seems sometimes that what we get on this wish list then becomes we're going to be doing that, and we lose the necessary discussion to really say how much money goes to that sort of project. I hear supervisors with the library saying if the Miller Arts Center moves out, we've got that space, we need to renovate it, and that's enough for that expansion in that area, not another $5 million on, so I could easily wait another month on deciding this and having the oversight committees take another look at some of these projects and understand them better.
Just really quick, so the committee, the whole idea on the maintenance, we just brought that up because I was trying to do, I guess, my homework before this meeting. It was brought up at public safety in terms of the issues that we're having with getting maintenance. So I just wanted to, in case a question came up, I actually scheduled a meeting with Steve, the sheriff, Aaron, Wayne, and myself. Did I miss anyone? Just to say, okay, I don't want to have a project on paper that says, well, should we be doing maintenance in that building, and all of a sudden have an extra $500,000 charge because I was worried about it going up again in terms of price. So all we had is a discussion of saying, okay, if we would consider that in the future, would this building be able to be designed to be able to handle that? And I had Wayne reach out to the architect. The quick answer was the lift would be the additional cost, but the building itself would still be able to be designed to handle that. Now, whether or not we do it, we're not even close to having that discussion, because even if we would do it, it's still a 1.5 years out because we have to build it. So it was just brought up at the committee meeting in terms of a concern about getting maintenance. I just wanted to address it so that way if there's a question on the document here, but the whole idea is actually already on the agenda for next month. And you guys can vet the whole thing, but it was just a discussion saying, hey, this came up at public safety. They referred it to highway facilities for next month. So it's on your agenda. The county board just happened to fall between those 2 meetings. So, but again, it was just a discussion. I'm just trying to cover some of the bases on that one. So.
Todd?
Yeah. So I want to make sure I'm clear about this. My comments are not in any way vetted toward our county finance department, or you can in regard to whether or not we're fiscally sound. I think we're doing a good job. It's just a matter of, just because we have money doesn't mean necessarily we need to spend it. So let's be clear with that. And just following back up in regard to the museum, as Dan has said, and I've heard many times from him that, we got to get going on this because we bought the Yonkers building and we said we we're going to do this 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. But the point I want to really stress here, folks, is that at committee level, we're going through drawings. We've changed some things in the front to incorporate what folks have wanted and all this kind of good stuff. I don't believe that 6.7 number has really ever gone up. There's an ambition to do this project for a dollar amount. If that comes in significantly higher, you got to revisit the ambition to do it. You have to, you have to have some qualifiers in there to take things out that are not necessarily everything that you want. Not because I think sometimes we just, okay, well, let's put $3 or $4 more million in there. That's my point I'm trying to make. And in the committee meetings several times, because we had to vote about approving architectural drawings, yes, and we approve this, assuming it falls within budget. And, you know, maybe I was criticized for leading the spear to not do this facilities building because it came way over budget. But I think that that's the link that I'm trying to make, is that if the county board is convinced that a project is needed with a notional price and it is significantly different, there has to be a revisitation about its ambitions to do these things at that price, no different than we do in our personal life. Now, again, where I have a hard time following the lily pads on this thing is that we're 1.15 million. There's been a discussion about moving maintenance and a whole bunch of stuff in there. Either that garage was way the hell too big before. If we're gonna do all the oil changes in there, how could that have been the same size as the garage that we just notionally had that conversation the past couple of months or our meeting? That's where I have a hard time piecing all this together. Either it was way the hell too big before we missed the conversation, or maybe there's a better place to do that. If that is a need, I'm not so sure there isn't a building right across from McDonald's that was built for that I don't know, you know, if there's anything in it anymore, you know. So again, visiting all kind of things here. So, all right, thank you.
Hugh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things relative to the tower project. Number one, do we have clarity now on where the towers are going to be located and some of the other, I'll call it, you know, high risk, high impact areas? I know with you know, the previous leader of the department now gone, that was kind of the next steps to kind of see, you know, what that would entail. So I think that's would be helpful to understand if that's there. And I know there was a discussion as well, and this kind of builds on the point and a concern that Supervisor Hayes had relative to tax levies. As you know, a lot of municipalities throughout the county are now going to start to potentially see tax levies in the future as they invest in their communities in broadband. And, you know, when you look at bonding again for something like the next generation, you know, communications that we need for our EMS, I think those are the kinds of things we need to make sure that whatever we're spending our money on, we're using the taxpayers' money wisely. And that means including things like, you know, dig once for fiber and all those other sorts of things where the communities can see the money they're spending, their municipalities can also be leveraged by the county where it makes fiscal sense. And I just want to make sure that we're doing that accordingly. Thank you.
Just really quick on the one was a good statement. The first one is a question though, in terms of the towers. We have an updated study that has been presented to the county. We're meeting with the chair on that study. Hopefully we're going to have a meeting with CATS, but also will be a discussion at our retreat. But that plan does outline the potential locations where the towers would be and also the potential coverage that would provide. So that'll be coming forward.
Okay. Other questions? So I guess the real issue is, do we want to proceed with adopting this today? Or do we want to send it back to committee? Or do we want to carve out those projects and send those back to committee and approve the rest?
I guess I'm looking at Steve, but I'd be comfortable if instead of carving it out, I mean, Steve and I will build the budget with what is in this document. Just because we have to move forward with the building of the budget. I guess, but Steve, just talking out loud, I guess I'm totally comfortable if you guys want to have the projects go back to their committees and have a discussion, just to have that, I guess, a last minute gut check, or just to kind of flesh out the detail more. And again, and maybe you won't get everything worked out, but is there enough detail for you to say that, yes, that's at least could be part of the planning process? And we could have it come back next month, or worst case, if we need additional time, we could bring it forward in September. Just so you know, Steve and I, though, we still need to build the budget overall, but Steve, do you see any issue with that?
No, as long as we have some type of directive as to how we need to build the budget, because again, it'll go into the retreat, so we can have something to you at the retreat, so we know, because I won't get the actual net new construction figure probably until sometime here in August. It's like middle or beginning of August, I'll get that, so I know how much our tax levy will go up. But at least that way we can have an idea at the retreat as to where we're at with the tax levy, and having some of this built in there would, you know, the directive of where the county board wants us to go to build in the KIP. So we already have that in there for you, so.
David?
The decision on this for 1 month anyway, so at least the oversight committees can get one more look at it. And if they're able to work with the budgeted dollars as they're planning, a 1 month delay, I think can still work out and we'd be more comfortable.
Okay. So Sean, just remove the motion in a second.
You could, yeah, and then bring it back for table. The issue with table is there is a motion in second in favor of the current. So procedurally wise, if you undo the first and second to take it off the table, then the motion would be whatever it is.
Okay, okay,
It can change.
okay. Alexis?
I have a clarifying question. If we continue to postpone this, which projects on the 2024 schedule are the ones that would be targeted to go back to committee?
Well, I guess what I would do is I'd ask every committee, or if you look at each department, if we're gonna vet each one of them out, I guess I'd ask each area to be reviewed. So again, so if you look at the again, I'd ask really for each one of those. So like, for example, the museum will go back to facility or highway facilities. The library could go back to a library board. Airport, highway facilities, the highway projects, I don't think there's controversy there because those adjust anyways, but we can still put those on at least for a review. Highway facilities would be for the maintenance garage. Emergency management would be public safety, just in terms of the hardware replacement. Along with also the ambulance station, and the tech services would be under admin technically now, but I could place that on the admin agenda for review. And land use services, I don't know what their meeting schedule is, but technically you guys could discuss that again if you'd like, if you're meeting next month and give us. Okay, so we could put that on the agenda and have a discussion if you'd like for that.
And the new lens and consideration here would be, we've talked about it all, like instead of looking at each project, now we've seen it all together as a picture, and where does it line? I guess I'm trying to figure out like what new, since this went through all the committees already, finance looked at the whole thing this month. I'm just trying to like, what new information or lens should the committees be considering if this goes back?
I guess the lens that I would look at is, one is, do we think we need that facility still as we think it's scoped out? But then also two, and what's kind of been brought up is what's that number we feel comfortable with in terms of proceeding forward. So for example, with the museum, if I was going to pick one that we're targeting, if we're actually targeting the 6.4, I'd ask the committee saying, okay, based off of everything we know to date, and I know in terms of that project, just because I've been in part of the groups, our expectation is that that project is going to come in at that number. Now, the question is like, if it comes in higher, what does that mean? Is there areas to cut, that type of thing? But as a committee, do you feel comfortable with what that total number is? I think it'd be a valuable, I think it'd be a valuable question. So what the total number, I guess, with that total number, the scope of what's being proposed for that building. And then I guess we could also look at if there's any questions on the timing, you could just ask the timing of that, just to confirm in terms of what you think the timing is of when that project could occur.
So
Those
you
three questions.
specifically honed in on the maintenance garage though. So the other projects, and I'm not trying to be a pain in the ass, I'm just trying to say like, do we really need to send this whole thing back if it's really just the sticking point is the maintenance garage still?
It's your pleasure, but I'm just trying to be consistent. So whatever you'd like.
So if I understand correctly, Sean, if we approve this today, as it is, that does not preclude facilities from going back and taking a look at the CIP number and coming back and altering and adjusting it prior to budget adoption or anything else.
It's a planning document. It's not setting anything in stone.
I mean, I totally agree. And the maintenance garage, the library, all these big multi-million-dollar projects are big, but and I'm gonna go against my own kind of thought about like, you know, I'm always willing to readjust and that kind of thing, but for this case, just because the finance, like you guys build the budget and there's these timing things that we've been doing for forever. It is just a planning document. We're not signing a resolution saying we're gonna do this, or this is the number. I don't know. I personally, I go either way. I just would rather see this just be done today. Just move forward. We don't need to hold up the whole thing because and I agree, we do need to revisit the maintenance garage, but that's just one of the projects.
Okay.
Thank you.
Personally, I think we should move forward with it. We have a motion and a second on it. There's the planning document, you come back and change. You still take it back to the committees for any particular project or projects. And it can still be changed well in advance of budget, and we can still talk about it at the retreat prior to doing it. So. Ready?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I guess, well, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, I think I have a different feeling. I think I hear finance saying they could delay 1 month, and that would be my recommendation. I think this is a good discussion. It's good that all supervisors, not just looking from a perspective of oversight committee, realize the scope of some of these projects, and maybe that'll influence the feeling and the direction of where we're going. So I don't know if you'd like that in the form of a tabling to next month or whichever manner.
Retreat would be September, which would be after our August meeting. So then we wouldn't get this back on until September's meeting. So that's 2 months from now. Just to, do I have that right?
We don't have to wait for the retreat. We could have each committee, we can put it on the agenda for August and then adopt it in August and have that still part of the retreat document then.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion.
Wait.
We have a motion on the floor. He has to withdraw. To go on to a new motion.
The motion that's on the floor can be withdrawn by the individuals that.
So moved. If we don't, if they don't so remove their motion, then, something of the table or would be in order.
Okay. So David made the motion originally.
Yep, so he could withdraw his motion, but we'd also need the second because that's before the committee.
To withdraw too. Okay.
Yep.
Wait, let's turn this on so we can hear you. Okay, do it again, Dave.
Okay, I'll make a motion to withdraw my original motion or, and bring it back next month.
Yeah. Okay. Dale, would you want to remove it or not?
I'll remove.
Okay,
So
so,
there's nothing on the floor.
so the motion's been removed and currently there's nothing on the floor. Okay. Right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, is there any other motion?
This meeting to the August meeting.
Okay.
With the intent to bring back a CIP resolution.
Okay. There's a motion to table. Is there a second?
We don't have a motion.
I'm sorry.
Table,
Oh, that's right,
it's
right. We can't, right. I'm sorry. You're right. Right. Sorry, I said that wrong. Yep. Let me turn your speaker on. What is your motion, Dave?
My intent is to have this come back next month after review by the oversight committees.
Okay.
We don't need a motion. Well, let's place it on the agenda.
Okay,
Since there's not been no action taken, there's nothing on the floor.
okay. However it needs to be done.
Clear as mud.
Clear as mud, right, okay.
Yep. Yep, we do.
Nancy, you have a motion then? Okay, got it. All right, so it doesn't exist. Okay.
Then you can just proceed on the agenda.
Okay, so we just. Off we go.
Yep, just go right down.
You got it?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
good.
There are no ordinances, new business, any oral committee reports from anyone? Review committee minutes? Any review of vouchers, claims, or bills? Do you have any announcements other than this? Do you have any announcements other than this? Okay.
WWCA, I don't think so. I didn't, nope.
Okay. So the next county board meeting is Tuesday, August 22nd at 9 a.m. And the county board retreat is Wednesday, September 6th at 8 a.m. And where's it at?
The same location as last year, the landmark, Nate Harbor.
A motion to adjourn would be in order. Okay. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor? Aye, opposed? Thank you.